Hi there.
Hey, Anne, how are you?
Still good.
Still good. Yes. Okay. It looks like we're successfully. Well, we're sharing to YouTube, but no one's got the link yet, so no one can see or hear us. So that's quite good.
Hi there.
Hey, Anne, how are you? Oh, hang on. Let me just mute this.
Still good.
Okay. There we go. It's a very nice house you've got. I meant to say this morning, actually.
Thank you. It's a nice place to be quarantined.
Yeah. No, I bet. Are you kind of in the country, or are you in the?
Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere, so I
Okay.
feel we're fairly safe.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I'm quite glad we're not right in the centre of Barcelona. Actually, that would be pretty hideous, I think, at the moment. So.
So you were in Barcelona?
Yeah. Well, we're just outside. We're about kind of 10, 15 kilometres outside, but it's kind of countryside-y. So we're sort of not that we're allowed to go out in any of it, but it's there at least, so we can look at it.
So how is that policed then? How would anybody know if you went out and you weren't supposed to?
It's a good question, actually. I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. I know they have sort of patrols kind of going around in cars, and I mean, I don't know. I think on bikes as well and stuff. But I mean, yeah, if you, I don't know. I think if you kind of got in sneakily into the woods, and then no one would know. But I don't know. It's not. There's no point risking it.
Self-control, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think, to be honest, they're probably I don't want to risk getting, because they'd fine us. You get a fine. I think it's like about €500 fine or something like that. So it's just not worth it, really. So yeah, we'll just deal with it.
Mm.
Hey, Helen.
Hiya.
How are you?
Good. Just got back from the dog walk.
Oh, yeah, in the nice view.
Yeah. Sunny where Anne is as well. Look, she's closing the curtains because of the sunshine.
It's a bit grey here, actually. So I'm just trying to work stuff out. I've got kind of various things on screens and monitors and stuff, and this is just a bit of a nightmare with the YouTube thing. It's working.
Is it working?
It seems to be working. Yeah, we're actually technically live on YouTube, but no one's got the link, so it's so we're okay. We're safe for the moment. We've got a few people, when I closed the registration, a few people emailed and said, can I join anyway? So I'm just trying to get things set up so that I can email them in case
of spaces.
Oh yeah, there's people already emailing. What's going on here? Sorry, I'm just going to deal with a couple of things. Helen, would you be able to send me your slides at some point?
Yes, I haven't. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do it after.
Okay.
Just in case, as I'm going through, I think of something else and then I add that to it, because that does sometimes happen when I'm giving presentations.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. I'll do it immediately after. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
I noticed a couple of discrepancies on mine, so maybe I should send mine again.
Okay, yeah, that's all right. Should be fine.
Your dog, Anne?
No, it's my neighbours.
Okay.
I think they decide to wait until either I'm having a meeting or or doing a webinar, and then the neighbour sends the dogs out to bark really loud.
Okay. I've told my husband, you've got to keep the dog's quiet for the next hour.
Right.
Because my camera really picks up. It's really quite sensitive.
Okay. Yeah, I might. Oh, she'll bring them in a minute. I'll go in. I had some neighbours over the back knocking on the door earlier, asking for their football back.
I have to throw it over the fence.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I love how people send you emails just 5 minutes before the webinar saying, I forgot to register. Can I do it now? And can you send me all the files from last week's webinar? Just, yeah, I'll just do that 2 minutes before we start.
Like, I'm not busy.
Yeah, no, exactly, not at all. Oh dear, I think we're going to be full again actually, which is good. So yeah, we're gonna if it's full, we're going to have 1,000.
Okay.
1,000 people. Let me just go do this again. Sorry, I am sort of here and listening to you. I'm just trying to deal with about 3 other things. So the Gavin was saying, or Nikki was saying, that the Teaching Live online course is proving quite popular in terms of sign-ups.
I can imagine.
Surprise.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I saw something today. Actually, Tom Kiddle was running something for. Oh, I can't remember what they're called now. I know Niall, but someone else. I think they're running a free teaching online course as well at the moment, aren't they? Okay. 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 All right. Are we all right to start? And I'll just kind of do the introductions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Okay, let's see the participant numbers going up. Okay. So hopefully everyone is able to get in. I'll just I'm just going to start a few things and just bear with me. Right. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second webinar in the series of Teaching Online. Very happy to be joined today by Helen Strong and Anne Fox. Both thanks for coming and welcome. Just to kind of give you a little bit of information, I'm just going to start recording. I think you will record it. So you'll probably get a little notification to accept that you're happy for it to be recorded. None of you will actually appear on the recording, so don't worry about that. Just a couple of things. First of all, like I said, we're recording the webinar and it will be available on the Teaching English website from later today. I'll put a link in the chat to that a little bit later today in the webinar, so that you have that. And also about certificates, there will be certificates. They are they're editable PDF certificates. So if you, the best browsers to use are Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. As I say, it's an editable, it's quite difficult to say, PDF. You just need to open it up and type your name in, and then you can download it and print that off and do whatever you need to do with that. Also, what else? There's a survey. If you could fill in the survey, I think when this webinar finishes, actually, it should automatically open the survey in your browser window. So please do fill in the survey. There's questions there about more about the kind of support that you need in addition to what we're doing with these webinars. So obviously that's great for us to get an idea of what your needs are, so that we can try and help with those. And yeah, I'll put a link in as well to the survey at the end, so that you have all of those. Okay, we're going to start. I'm going to introduce Helen. Helen's going to be speaking first. She's a life and career coach based in the Outer Hebrides off the northwest coast of Scotland, and she showed us the view from her window earlier on, and made us all very jealous. It's very nice. She's originally from the north of England. She spent most of her adult life working in the German corporate sector, helping people improve their intercultural communication skills. She's been heavily involved in teacher training, tutoring on CELTA courses in Germany and the UK, as well as working with ministries of education and ELT associations in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. Before becoming a coach, Helen tutored on the CERT IBET and teaching one-to-one courses for the consultancy, and I'll put links into those a bit later as well, so you have those. So Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, can everybody hear me okay? Can I just have a couple of yeses in the chat if you can hear me okay? Fantastic. Okay, right. Yes, let me see. Oh, Paul, I'm trying to share my screen and it says I can't.
Okay, sorry. Okay, okay now.
Yeah, mine's called What Happens If the Technology Fails. So Paul, make me share my screen. Okay, right, I can share my screen now. Okay. Okay, can everybody see now this? Again, let me get the chat up so that I can see. Yes, right, okay. Those yeses are for that you can see my slide. Okay, yeah, so like Paul said, my name is Helen Strong. I'm a consultant and coach for the consultancy. Before I started coaching, I was a tutor for the consultancy. And sorry, and just playing with the technology here. And what I'm going to talk about with you today is what to do if the tech fails. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this topic is because I have experience of it myself. I have experience of the tech failing. So I'd like to actually start by sharing something that happened, a story that happened with you of the tech failing for me. And that was with a course that I was tutoring on, a teacher training course for the consultancy. This was a couple of years ago. And we'd set up everything. This wasn't a last minute thing, you know, everything had been prepared, and we used the platform Moodle. So everything was ready. All of the course documents were uploaded to the Moodle. We were all set to go live on this particular day. We'd been corresponding with the participants via email the whole time. And the course was due to go live on a Monday. And on the Sunday, then I sent a final email to the participants saying, you know, the course is open tomorrow morning, you know, off you go. And then I opened the course on the Moodle. And then on the Monday morning, I had an email in my inbox from one of the course participants saying, I can't get into the platform. And I thought, oh, something wrong here. So I tried, I couldn't get into the platform myself. So I wrote directly back to this one participant and said, okay, let me check. I'm having the same difficulty. Let me check and I'll get back to you as well. And then I got on to both Gavin Dudney, our Director of Technology, and Nikki Hockley, who's the Director of Pedagogy. So what's going on? We can't get into the platform. And I had an email back from Gavin. We know something's gone wrong. I don't know what it is. I'm onto it. You know, we'll get it sorted. You you know, I'm onto it. So I write to Nikki, you know, what do I tell the participants? So Nikki says, okay, tell them that we're dealing with it. We hope to have it back on as soon as in the next few hours, if we can. We'll keep them updated. And if they need an extension to the deadline for the first week's deadline, then they can have that. You know, we need to reassure them. So all this panicking was going on, you know, all this work that had gone into developing this course, and then the technology wasn't there in order for the course to be delivered. So I was really quite panicking at this point, you know, underneath. But I calmed down. And I wrote an email to all the participants and said, you know, we're having difficulties with the platform. It's the first time that this has happened. It was actually the first time it had happened, and we'll get back to you as you know, we're working on it, and we'll get back to you as soon as it's up and running. Now, as it happened, it was up and running the next day. Something had happened. It had reset itself during the night, and the next day it was up and running. So it was okay. But the reason that I'm telling you this is because you know, the technology can fail even for the best of us. You know, the consultancy have been in this business for a long time, and they could do nothing. The server had failed, something had failed. But we are on the front line, and we have to deal with it, and we have to reassure our participants that you know, it's not the end. We're onto it. We'll do the best that we can to get onto it. We have to stay calm, because if we panic, then maybe we can't find the solution to the problem. And what I thought was really nice in this instance was that not only did I send an email to the participants to say, you know, we'll get onto this, and you can extend the deadline, and so on. We're trying to help you here. But then Gavin and Nikki, so my bosses, then also wrote to the participants on top of my email and said, yes, you know, this is what's happening, and like Helen says, you can have an extension to the deadline, and that made me feel really, you know, I was backed up by my colleagues in this. So what I'm trying to say here is that if the technology fails, communicate. You need some way of communicating with your participants. And it's also, this is a message also to school managers or anybody else who's involved in helping the teachers with the technology, is to also make sure that you're backing up your teachers, you know, to say you're not on your own. Just because the technology has failed for you, come to us and we'll help you. And even you as a manager, write to the students as well, so that you don't feel that the teacher is kind of, you know, in this on their own. So that's a little anecdote just to hopefully make you feel better, because you know, even those of us who have been doing it for a long time, things can go wrong. Stay calm, know that you've got the backup of your colleagues, make sure that you have got the backup of your colleagues, and deal with, yeah, whatever comes up. Having said that, that sounds a bit doom and gloom, but I want to give you some positive things of things that you can do in order to kind of alleviate the damage. Like I said, we used an email. I got on by email, and this is the type of thing that I'm going to talk about in this session. So I'm going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes on these 5 things. The first 3 points here, I'm going to cover very, very quickly. This is just to make sure that we're all on the same page when we're talking about technical equipment and the difference between synchronous and asynchronous platforms. But the main part of what I'm going to talk about are the backup plans, like the email that I just talked about now, and also some things to watch out for as well. So technical equipment, yeah, obviously something like a laptop or a PC, a tablet, if you do use a tablet. A small phone is probably not ideal, although I'm aware that some of your students may be using small phones. But for yourself, I would say you probably need something larger. I have I have a home office here, and my screen here is really quite big, and I've got a camera on the top of it here. If you have the luxury of being able to do that, then you know, that's good. But a laptop, I've also done it when I've been traveling, used a laptop. Camera, I'll come to using camera later. Headphones, I've got earphones in right now. I do prefer earphones to not having earphones, because some of the technical difficulties that you can have if you don't have earphones or headphones is you have a bit of echo, where if one person is speaking, it can come through the microphone of somebody else. So it is actually good to have earphones yourself, and to encourage your students to use headphones or earphones as well. And then obviously having an internet connection. Yeah, you need an internet connection and electricity, you know, and things like that. Obviously, things can go wrong with an internet connection. I'll give you a couple of ideas of a backup plan on that. If things go wrong with electricity, there's probably not a lot you can do about that. Yeah, so that was just a little bit about technical equipment. Synchronous platforms then. So synchronous, yeah, we're talking about things where you join at the same time synchronously, such as this Zoom platform that we're on now. So when you're having your live meetings, these are the synchronous meetings. So Zoom or Skype or Adobe Connect. I've also heard people being using Teams or even Facebook Live, or you know, other things where you're meeting online at the same time. That's what we mean by the synchronous platforms. And then the asynchronous platforms are where you don't need to be online at the same time. I mentioned at the beginning the Moodle platform that we use for our courses at the Consultants E. The Moodle platform is a VLE, a virtual learning environment, often referred to as an LMS as well, learning management system. Basically some place where all of your documents and your course is together at one place. That can be accessed by yourself and your students, but you don't have to do it at the same time. Other asynchronous platforms could be that you might want to put part of your course, if you haven't got the luxury of having something like a Moodle, into a chat group such as Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, Hangouts, Slack, anything like that. You could move part of your course to those areas as well. Google Docs as well. I know in the webinar last week, Lindsay Clanfield mentioned about using Google Docs for teaching, and that could also be an area where you could have some of your course taking part there. And then if you have your own blog or wiki, or you're thinking of setting up your own blog or wiki and running some of your courses in there, that's also an option. I'm not going to say too much about any of these things because there's so much written, there's so much available out there on these things that yeah, I'm just going to talk about what to do if the technology fails. Okay. Right, so getting to the main part of what I want to talk about here is the backup plans. So yeah, so I mentioned I used email with my participants. Another thing, I mean, I mentioned the things like Facebook, WhatsApp, Google Hangouts, and Slack. You could run part of your course on there. Or you could use it simply as a way that you and your students can get in touch with each other if, for example, they can't get into the live session. So you've scheduled a live session on Zoom or whatever synchronous video conferencing software you're using, and for some reason they can't get into the room. And you've already set up your Messenger or your WhatsApp group or whatever, they can contact you via that. Another way that they can contact you, which is the one that I used with my participants, was via email. So create a group in your address book of the email addresses of just that one particular group that you're teaching, so that you can send an email to them all at once, and you can keep them informed about other things, reminders, send them the address of the Zoom room, or you know, send group mailings to them via email as well. An alternative, and I think you should probably go for all three of these, one from each category here. Have one chat group, one email, get their email addresses, and get their phone numbers as well. Because if for any reason the internet goes down for any one of your participants, then they need a way of being able to contact you, which is not internet dependent, because everything that we've talked about so far, these groups, are all internet dependent. So if they don't have internet or don't have electricity, you know, something's gone wrong with the electricity supply, but they still have their phone, then they may be able to contact you by phone as well. So it's possibly a good idea to think about these different backup plans, just so that your students know that if anything goes wrong, they do have some way of contacting you. I think at the moment, you know, with the crisis at the moment, people are, you know, isolated, physically isolated, and it's really, really necessary for people to feel connected. And if one of your students, you know, whatever age group as well, but maybe the younger ones, if they're feeling that they can't get into the space where the teacher and all, you know, all the students are having a lesson together, or having, you know, communicating together, if one student can't get into that space, that can really feel quite isolating for them. So I think just having the ability to, oh, someone's saying, my Lord, can I speak a little louder? Is the sound okay here, Paul? Somebody's asking me to speak louder.
It's fine for me, Helen.
It's fine, okay. Maybe you could try turning the volume up. Sounds fine, okay. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, finding a way to, I lost my train of thought now. Yeah, to meet in, to get some way of connecting. So yeah, to stop this isolated feeling, basically, and something which is not connected to the internet. Right, okay, just a quick check then in the chat. Am I making sense so far? Any questions so far? Yeah, the thing about the phone number, that's one thing I wanted to mention. Obviously with very young learners, if you're teaching young learners and you've got the issue there of, you know, how you get in touch with the young learners, that I imagine then would be through the parent, you know, even the parents have got a group together. So, so that would be something there to think about. Okay, right, that looks all right. No questions, perfect, okay. All right, and then moving on to the last part I want to talk about, although this is the biggest part, things to watch out for. So I've split this into different things to watch out for. The first one I'm talking about is the synchronous meetings. So like Zoom, like the one that we're having now. Yeah, in the first 5 minutes, you can just reckon with the first 5 minutes of your session is going to be that everybody can hear and see. Okay, somebody mentioned about there with the camera. Obviously, if somebody's having a camera problem, then you just have to accept that they're having a problem and they can just join audio only. But you really need to spend, if you've got a large group of people and you need to make sure that everyone can see and hear okay, and also can speak, you know, everyone needs to check in and say, can you hear me? Excellent language to practice. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I can't hear you. So things like that. But that you really need to make sure before you jump into your lesson that everybody is present from a technological side of it, that everyone is there, everyone can see and hear and be heard. Okay. If the bandwidth is low, consider turning off the cameras. So it could be that your students are spread out all over the world, and in some places their bandwidth is low, or even if they're still in the same city, there could be the bandwidth could be low for some reason. Then yeah, consider obviously turning off the cameras, because that takes up a lot of bandwidth. But my advice would be to keep your own camera on if possible, because it's very reassuring for your students to be able to see the teacher. And one thing which I'm trying to do when I'm speaking to you here is I'm trying to look in the camera, and you can see the difference between me looking in the camera here and me looking elsewhere in the screen, looking at the chat or looking at this and looking at that. So, you know, you decide what feeling is it giving you when the teacher is looking directly at the camera. You know, does it feel good that you're being spoken to here? And what happens if the teacher's doing other things and, you know, clicking buttons and things like that. But that's why I think it's important for the camera to be on the teacher, so that the learners, again, don't feel so isolated. They can see their teacher. Another thing to think about with the technology is to make sure that you mute learners when they're not speaking, because often you can get a lot of background noise which distorts things. So if there's a part of the session that you're giving where, like what I'm doing now, where I'm wanting to explain something, you're looking at something on my screen and I'm talking you through it, then there's no real reason for the learners to have their microphones on. So that, you know, I might say something to you now and then I want to ask you a question or call on individuals, then it would be okay to unmute. And you can do that yourself in software. You can mute and unmute yourself. Some things like ground rules that you might want to agree on as well, rather than set the ground rules, maybe agree on the ground rules. But things that can affect the technology definitely would be to close all of the other windows. Any windows that you've got open, anything which is using your bandwidth, you know, just close the other windows before you come onto your Zoom room. Make sure that you're present, that you're listening, be respectful. There's things like the raise hand function, which you can, if you want, you can ask the learners to do this, or there is a raise hand function on the Zoom, and speak clearly and things like this. So some ground rules that you can agree on, but from a technological perspective, the one about closing other windows is probably the most important. Yeah, some other thing, this was mentioned last week about using the flipped classroom approach, so that you're not being in the synchronous meeting unnecessarily, because the synchronous meeting is using a lot of bandwidth. There's things that can go wrong. So shift as much as you can, shift whatever you can into the asynchronous part of it. The flipped classroom, Ali, is just basically thinking about, is there anything that I can shift from this live session that we're having now that I could have the students do beforehand? So this would be, for example, if you want the students to do a reading and you want to discuss the text in the session, you have them read the text beforehand, because there's no point coming online and then saying to your students, right, everybody read the text now. Have them read it beforehand. That's basically what the flipped classroom is, and then in the session you talk about it. If you disappear, it could be that your camera goes off for any reason. If you disappear, use your the backup plan that I mentioned, and then recording this session. I've put a question mark on that point, because yeah, I think this is something which is you can decide whether you want to record the session. Yeah, I'm having questions to explain the flipped classroom again. I'm not going to do that because that's really out of the remit of what I'm asked to talk about. But if you Google flipped classroom, there's plenty written on engage, you know, using the flipped classroom. My point here is basically make sure that you're making the best use of the synchronous meetings by not having your students just reading something while you're watching them. Right, okay, so that was things to watch out for in synchronous meetings. Yes, Linda, the flipped classroom is basically having students prepare for the lesson beforehand. Good, thanks, Linda. In the asynchronous platforms, yeah, these are not really technical issues, but I wanted to say them anyway because they are really important. You as a teacher at the beginning of the course, definitely should be posting regularly. So whichever asynchronous platform you choose or you're using, even if it's just your Facebook group, make sure that you post a lot at the beginning to get the momentum going, and then you can back off a little bit later, so that the learners know that you're there, and you're also modeling how you want the learners to be engaging with each other. Again, agree on certain ground rules, such as, you contribute to the discussions. Create a reassuring atmosphere. I think this is very important, which encourages posting and cross-commenting. Model this yourself. So what I mean here is some learners may be a little bit reticent about posting if they've only had face-to-face contact with you before, and then suddenly you're saying, okay, now we're going to have the course using asynchronous platforms and synchronous platforms. It may be new for the learners, and so you have to really reassure them that that whatever they say is valuable. So, they post something and you say, yeah, that's a fantastic post. Thanks very much for posting that. Does anybody else want to comment on that? So again, it's creating this, it's a new sphere for many people, and you're there to kind of create this reassuring, recreate the classroom atmosphere in the online realm, really. And then finally, things to watch out for, both synchronous meetings and asynchronous platforms. I mentioned this before. Be aware that some learners may be logging in via their phones, which means that they may have very small screens or limited capacity, or limited, the limited capacity to do a lot of things. So just be aware of that. Keep learners involved, keep checking in on them. This is both the live and the synchronous. Is everything okay in the live meeting? If you haven't heard, if somebody hasn't posted on the asynchronous platform for a while, check in on them. Contact them via one of your backup plans. Is everything okay? Can you get into the platform? And make sure they know how to contact you if they can't get either into the live meeting or into the course platform. So keep reminding them of that. Okay, coming to the end of my, let's just check. I agree that speaking is the best for an online classroom. Yeah. Is this platform good for testing this year? I'm not going to go into testing, Maureen, just now. Yeah, so there are questions in the, we'll come back to the Q&A later. So finally, my last slide is basically, hopefully this is some helpful advice for you. My first thing would be relax and don't panic, in the same way that I said at the beginning. I know this is going to be new for a lot of you, but it will get easier. So relax. If you can't relax, then try to relax, and that will lead to you relaxing, hopefully. So stay calm when things go wrong. Be yourself. Your students know you. I'm assuming for a lot of you that you've had the face-to-face lessons, the classroom lessons with your students already, and then suddenly it's being switched to online. You are the same person. They recognize you, they're looking to you. You are a position of authority for a lot of them, and they're looking up to you to run this. So just be yourself. Remember that you are a good teacher. This is pedagogy. The technology will not replace the pedagogy. The pedagogy is what matters. So don't forget everything that you've learned about your pedagogy. This is who you are, and this is the forefront of what you need to be doing. There's a quote I heard a few years ago, which I think is a really, really good one, and this is about technology, pedagogy and technology. And it is, technology will not replace teachers, but teachers who use technology will replace those who don't. And I think probably now we're at a really, really good point where this is the case. So if you haven't made good use of technology in the past, now is the ideal time to do this. yeah, things like, laugh when things go wrong. If something goes wrong, just, laugh, get your students to help you as well. For some of you, particularly teaching, maybe teens or people in their 20s, maybe they know a lot of of what's going on. You're struggling. Tell the students that this is all new for you. It's a give and take, that you're delivering the pedagogy, but they'll have to help you with the technology. So then that gives them a little bit more power to feel that or empowerment, shall I say, to make them feel that they're really helping the teacher. Students are great assistants. They are, definitely. You can do this. You can do this. I have faith in everybody who's tuned in today. So yeah. So that was my bit. And yeah, this is again, Paul mentioned the consultancy who I work for, and the current course, which is probably the most popular one right now, is the Teaching Live Online course, and the next session starts on the 20th of April, so you can sign up for that one. And that was it. Paul, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Helen.
I need to stop sharing. There we go.
On my screen. Thanks very much for that, Helen. I think that was very useful. Thank you, and hopefully people in the chat have said the same thing as me. Yes, lots of thank yous. So yeah, so great.
Okay. Shall I answer any questions from the Q&A now, or should we do that after?
Yeah, should we do it after? I think. Is
yes.
That okay?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I'll mute my microphone now so that I don't make excess noise.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Helen. Okay. So moving on to Anne Fox. I'll just introduce Anne for those of you who don't know her. It's a strange thing to say. So she's a freelance online learning consultant specializing in language learning, intercultural communication and entrepreneurship. And after moving to Denmark in the 90s, she became a language teacher using the emerging digital technologies, both in her teaching and to keep in touch with her now distant family. In Denmark, she's worked in language schools, a vocational college and an adult residential high school. She's also been an assistant professor at NTNU in Norway and is a regular visiting teacher at the Koblenz Hochschule in Germany. That was terrible pronunciation, do apologize. And is co-host and producer of the Absolutely Intercultural podcast, which started in 2006 and currently works mainly on European projects that explore new and innovative approaches to learning. She's also an author, including an English coursebook for Danish seniors to help them to communicate when they travel. Anne, over to you.
Thank you. Right, so there we go. Right, so I am one of Helen's colleagues with TCE, and I'm going to be talking about lesson structure and task types. So there's a theme to my bit, and the theme is that whatever you're thinking of doing, cut it and then expand what you've got left. I saw something on social media recently where somebody was told to cut in half again, and cut in half again. I'm not sure you want to be that drastic, but that is basically the message. So whatever you were planning in the face-to-face classroom, really consider how much of it's really important to do. There'll be lots of reasons why. I want to show, first of all, this diagram, which is looking at the options that you are faced with when you go online. And the green square at the bottom left is about the simplest ways of communicating with your students. And then going up to the yellow quadrant, you've got things that you may have prepared before that you make available to your students, such as video and audio, or having discussions with them. You could even have video discussions and audio discussions. The blue rectangle shows more immediate possibilities using collaborative documents like Google Docs, where several people can work on the document at the same time, or using group chat and messaging. And then if we go up to the top right-hand corner, we've got the red square, the red rectangle, which is the video conferences and audio conferences. And I have a feeling that everybody thinks of this immediately when you are talking about doing online classes. And it's actually not necessarily the only thing you can do. It's not necessarily the best thing you could do. And you should perhaps think about the balance between the different squares on this diagram. So I would start by taking a good look at the diagram and thinking, what is it you want to achieve, and which parts of it can be in the green part, the yellow part, the blue part. The red part is the really intensive use of resources and is probably best saved for certain types of tasks. So now I hope that I don't upset anybody by going back to the lesson planning theory. But this is a really good time to think about how you go about planning your classes. And this diagram is just one out of many possible ones. It could be that you're in a situation where you have to hand in a lesson plan for every single lesson that you do, or it could be that you're in a context where you're so experienced that you don't need to do it and the authorities don't require it. But I think now would be a good time to actually look at what you're trying to do and look at it from this perspective, which is, what do you want to achieve? So the backward design process is trying to work out, what is it that you're actually focusing on? What do you want your students to be able to do by the time they finish the lesson? And once you've done that, so that's the red circle, the red arrow on here, you then say, well, how will I know that they've achieved this? So you look at what assessment you're going to want from them. And then finally, you come to planning the learning experiences and instructions. This is really basic, but it would be really helpful in this situation because it would help you to focus on what it is that's important. So the activities comes last in this diagram. I've seen this mentioned for school teaching, and then in higher education, people talk about constructive alignment, and it's exactly the same thing. It's about what you want people to be able to do, how you're going to assess them, and then how you're going to get them to actually practice and get skilled in that. So some sort of lesson planning document might be a good idea. This one is freely available. For example, it's called the 5 E's. And this one is about making transparent and making obvious all the different stages of the lesson. And again, this is maybe not something that you are used to doing in the face-to-face classroom. I know that in some countries you are, or people think that you are expected to put the objectives on the board before you start. But in some contexts, it's not necessary. But just in this case, I'm not saying for every lesson, but when you're first starting to go online, think about how you're going to engage your learners, how you're going to excite them and want them to do what it is that you've got lined up for them. The explore is about the information, the content. So what sort of content are you going to want them to interact with before they do something? And then inserting an explanatory content maybe is necessary. And then elaborating is about the actual activity that you want them to do. And then how you're going to evaluate it both for yourself and also for what they have done. And I've put as my heading, this is the 5 E's lesson plan. I'm sure you may have your own template, but I've put what is an online lesson anyway. And the reason that I've done that is because referring back to that diagram that I started with, some of it may be asynchronous and some of it may be synchronous. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few possibilities for interaction, and then we're going to look at an actual task, and I'm going to deconstruct the task and then reconstruct it so that it becomes suitable for online. So what sort of interactions can you include in a task? So a student teacher is the most expensive in terms of time and effort. So student to student is worth investigating. What can you do that will involve student to student interaction? Student community is maybe not so practical when we're trying to do social distancing, but student community is about using the location in which the student finds themselves. The student to community could be making use of their family, for example, wherever they're living. Student to material is about interacting with the content, and student to technology is maybe what a lot of people immediately think about when you're talking about online learning, which is about quizzes and so on. I put it at the bottom because although it's useful, I wanted to show that there are lots of different possibilities and you don't have to rely 100% on quizzes. So we're making a big thing here of interaction. There are lots of reasons for that. First of all, if I guess I'm talking to language teachers mainly, then language is about interaction. So from that point of view, it's obvious. And also, if we think about social learning and that you learn by interacting with others, then that's another very good reason for including a lot of interaction when you're doing your online teaching. But how do you do it? So the next thing is to look at different types of interactions. Now here, I'm very reliant on work done by Lindsay Clanfield and Jill Hadfield, and they wrote a book which is called Online Interaction. You probably don't want to read a book at this point, but I'm just naming my sources. So they talk about in their book different types of interactions that you can try and promote. So for example, open response, which is could be a response to a provocative question. Guided response, where the teacher models a possible response as an example. This is incredibly useful when you're online, actually. I do a lot of teacher training online, and many of the, not all, far from all, but many of the tasks I model an answer so that my participants know what I'm expecting. Sequential stimulus could be a series of related stimuli that all the learners respond to. Chain reaction, for example, building a story sentence by sentence. Multiple stimuli when you give each learner a different stimulus to react to. And you could be also talking about small group interaction in a breakout room. So I'm showing this because I want to show that there is a wealth of possibilities when you go online. It's not just about having a reading and then doing some comprehension questions. So where the interaction happens, if we're in the red rectangle and we're in a live place, there are, for example, this Zoom is getting a lot of publicity at the moment. And if you look at the possibilities within Zoom in a live session, you can have audio, as we've already heard. You can have video, you can share your screen as I'm doing it now. You can use the chat box as you are doing very vigorously right now. You can use polls, you can share a document which the participants can write in at the same time. You can share a video, you can share a URL and explore a website together. So there are all sorts of different possibilities when you're online, live online, but there are also lots of possibilities when you're asynchronously online. So going back to Lindsay Clanfield and Jill Hadfield's book, they have a potential sequence of events for planning an online lesson, which I think is very helpful. And they say that you should start with whether you're going to be looking at a topic or language practice. Whichever one it is, which topic is it going to be, which language point is it going to be, and then decide on a type of activity. And I started putting examples on these different activities, but I was thinking actually the coronavirus would do for all of them, but maybe people are getting bored of the coronavirus. But an activity type can be getting students to talk about their personal situation. It can be getting them to find out factual information. They can be creative. They can do some critical debating, or they can be more fanciful, and you can do, for example, some role play. I've done online role play in various formats. So once you've decided what sort of activity you want to do, you then have to decide what sort of supportive material you need in order to carry out the activity. It could be a reading, a video, a website, whatever. And then decide on what sort of interaction pattern you want to stimulate in your activity. And I'll say more about that in a minute. And decide which bit is going to be synchronous and which bit is going to be asynchronous. Here I am talking very much in the dark because I don't know what you have been required to do or advised to do, but it's quite possible that you could do this completely asynchronously. It's quite possible. I've heard awful rumors of some authorities requiring children to have a full school day on live video every day. I think that's terrible, terrible use of resources, but it's possible that you've been asked to do this. So you have to decide, but hopefully you'll have the choice, and then you can make the best choice about what's best synchronous, what's best to do asynchronously, as has already been mentioned by Helen when she was talking about reading. And then the most important is about how you're going to convey to your students what you want them to do. And here you need to pay attention to what stages the activity goes through and what instructions you're going to give. And do not underestimate how clear you have to make the instructions. So how are you going to judge whether you got a good lesson or not? You can ask yourself, are your instructions clear and easy to follow? Does the activity that you've devised move towards a goal or outcome? And does it promote interaction? If you can tick all three of those, you may have got a very good activity to put online. And perhaps, well, I was going to say the first one is the most difficult one, but we shall see. So let's see if we can apply this, and let's take a typical task, deconstruct it and reconstruct it. So here's something that you might do in class. So read an article about emoji use in the UK and Japan. Then there are some attached comprehension activities, do those. Post your reactions to the article in our forum by Friday, April the 13th. Let's get the discussion going. Okay, so that's nice and friendly, but it probably won't work online. The reason for that is that you've given a deadline, and your typical student will probably leave it until the last minute. So everybody will be frantically working on the evening of Friday, April the 13th, if that is a real date, I haven't checked. And what you'll get is not much interaction. So we need to improve it, and it needs to be structured and staged. So that's what we'll have a look at now. So here, what I've done is I've broken down the task into different stages. So the first stage is a sort of activation phase where you activate the students with the topic, which was about emojis. And you put 4 questions here. Do you use emojis a lot? What are some common emojis you use? And so on and so on. And you ask them to choose one question to respond to in the discussion forum. And this is it's very clear here that what you're expecting is 75 words or less, and you're putting an interim deadline as well by Monday, April the 9th. So remember that deadline, Friday the 13th. Now we've got a deadline for these questions, which is 4 days in advance. Then number 2, read the article about emoji use. And then number 3, go back to the forum, see what the other students have posted in stage 1, choose at least 2 posts and leave a comment or question. You could ask for more detail or ask a question related to something you read in the article. This is much more detailed than we saw in the original. It's actually giving students an idea about what is expected of them and what they should be doing. So you're saying at least 2 posts, you might ask a question, you might leave a comment and so on. And then finally check the forum regularly to see if anyone's left you a comment or asked you a question that you need to answer. So this is just showing how you can take a task which maybe all your students understand what you expect if you present this in the classroom, the face-to-face classroom, but when you put it online, it needs to be much more broken down and staged. And if you really want the students to interact with each other, you have to show how that happens. This might be also part of it, could be synchronous. This is so far all asynchronous. And so the last part could be a synchronous session. And then you could have a really good debate about some of the issues that came up. And finally, you might want to see what that looks like online. I hope this is readable, but online, what you need to do is you need to give your tasks a similar appearance so that your students get used to what you expect from them and how the things are presented, so it's easy for them to find the information. So you've got the number of the task, the name of the task, why we're doing the task, and how long we think it's going to take. I'm not sure if the timing is right, actually. And then you've got the stages, which I've just shown you, and then this is the actual text that you would send to the students. So this is really mainly what I wanted to say, and I'll go back to my theme. My theme is cutting and expanding what you've cut down to so that it becomes more understandable for the students and they can follow what they need to do. And I have some links, but basically that is the end of my session.
Great. Thank you. Again, very useful. Just so everyone knows, we will be sharing a PDF version of both Helen and slides. So if you missed those links or any other slides that you wanted to have a look at, they will be available. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got some links as well. Here we go. Let's see if that works. Can you see that okay? There's just some links there. So the first one is the kind of generic link on teaching English to all of our webinars, including this one, the one last week, and information about the one next week and the week after. If you go to that link, I'll put it in the chat as well, because I know some people are watching on mobile and links don't work or they're not clickable on a mobile phone. So I'll just put that into the chat. Don't anyone type anything for a couple of minutes. Oh, okay, they are. Okay, if you scroll up, you'll see something from me there, which is a link to all of the webinars. So all of them are recorded. This one is recorded. The one last week was recorded. Later on today, the recording of this webinar will be available. If you go to that link and find this webinar, you'll see the recording and also the slides from Anne and from Helen. Also the certificate will be available there as well. At the end of this session, when we've finished with the Q&A, on your computer, if you're using a laptop or a desktop, you'll be automatically redirected to a survey. As I said at the beginning, please do fill that survey in, because it's very useful for us. There's a question in there about the kind of support that you need as a teacher, or as a teacher educator, if you're a teacher educator, a manager or a researcher or a teacher trainer. And that helps us to schedule the next set of webinars after this one, and also provide the support, as much support as we can. If you're on a mobile phone, there's also the survey. I'll put a link into that into the chat. There we go. Okay, and there's also a link to the certificate, but that's going to be available in about 100 different places, so you don't have to worry about copying that one. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll start to look at some of the questions. And Helen, I don't know if you managed to have a look at any of the questions while the other people were talking. Possibly not. I sort of tried to answer a few.
I answered one or two, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot that I think would probably be better to talk rather than.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, just I mean, we're going to look at questions that are relevant to the topics that both Anne and Helen talked about. So any kind of question. Okay, yeah, there you go.
That was one question.
Yes.
Is it back to front?
No, it's fine. Interaction.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect. And that's Lindsay Clanfield and Jill Hatfield. Okay, so yeah, so any questions that you put in the chat that aren't really relevant necessarily to Helen or Anne's presentations, we may not get to answering those because we may not have the answers, basically. Okay, I don't know if you want to take your pick. I mean, I can pick some out for you if you want.
Well, the GDPR and the phone numbers, I think, is an issue. Do you want to say something about that yourself, Paul?
We can do. I mean, I think it's obviously, yeah. With phone numbers, with email addresses, you don't want to be saving those or storing those anywhere that isn't secure. If you've got consent from students to give them, for them to give you their email address, their phone number, then this is fine. You want to have written consent. I think with that, you don't want to be storing them on a document or anywhere online that could be hacked or anything like that. You just need to be very careful. With young learners, again, it's a question of having the parents' contact details, I think, with that, and just kind of being sensible. There were a lot of questions about recording. Actually, you wouldn't have seen this, but in the YouTube stream that we're running about recording and filming students. And obviously, you know, with online, you have the ability to do that. With young learners, I would never ever record a lesson. With adults, if they've given written consent for it to be recorded, then kind of use your common sense with that. But then also, in a way, I'm sort of thinking with a face-to-face lesson, you're not going to be, you don't film a face-to-face lesson. So if there's a student that misses it, they've missed the lesson, you can, if you have their email addresses, then you can send them the material that they've missed from or tell them where in the book what you were using in the book, or the exercises or the tasks, or if there's something on an asynchronous platform that you're using, then you can share those links. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much value there is in actually recording a lesson always, and not expecting students who've missed it to watch it, because I think often, you know, they're probably not going to. But again, it's common sense with that. I don't know if either of you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would add that if a teacher is working at a school, obviously, then you can check with your managers at the school what the policy is. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
But be very aware of data protection nowadays.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right, Helen. Actually, yeah, it's a good point. Most schools do have a policy on this, and most language academies should have a policy on this as well. So hopefully that answers the question. around GDPR, data protection, and those things.
There's another question here from Suzanne McMahon. How many learners on video at one time do you recommend using in the same, like in Zoom? I've been to online conferences before where there have been 1,000 people taking part. You know, Zoom is an amazing tool now. I mean, I don't imagine that any of your classes have got 1,000 students, but you could, you know, if the facility is there, then yes, you can use it. The thing about them being on video at the same time, you know, if you're explaining something like in the same way that I was explaining my part of this session to you, I can't see you. So your videos are all switched off here, which is fine because I don't need to see you as I'm talking to you. But then when you're doing, you know, a group feedback, or, you know, you want the student to report on something that they want to say, a student wants to say something, then I think it is nice for them to switch the video on, or for everybody to see each other's video at the same time. At the moment, there are 3 of us in this room at the moment. So Anne and Paul and me, you can see our 3 videos. And if you're watching at the top right-hand corner of the video screen, you can toggle or switch between gallery view and speaker view. So if you're on speaker view already, then switch to gallery view, and then you'll see that you'll see the 3 of us, we've all got the same size screen. And I think it's really nice if you're teaching, you know, you've got a group of 10 or 20 or 30 students, that they can all see each other on the one screen, I think is really nice, rather than having the one picture in the middle of the teacher, for example. That's a really nice way of doing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I prefer gallery view. Nothing worth seeing yourself.
It's a bit more collaborative, I think, rather than just having one big person in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what else? And what's the difference between creative and fanciful activity type?
Oh, right. Not much difference, really. I mean, the example of creative activity is a collaborative story writing or collaborative poem, and fanciful is more a sort of role playing or brainstorming a solution to a fantasy problem, something like that. I think it's yeah, they overlap.
Okay. Speaking.
Can I just answer? Bernadette Smith has written, I think I only have the choice of gallery or speaker view when I'm the host. No, that's not right. Anybody can switch between gallery and speaker, the participants as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So I did see a question about whether I would give out all the activities at the same time. This is what I'm used to. But it's making me think whether there'd be any circumstances in which I wouldn't want to do that. But I think by and large, it's better to let students see the logic of what you're trying to ask them to do over the next few days. So I would go for showing every task in one page.
Okay. There's a question here about sound. Can you share your computer sound in Zoom? Yes, you can. If you're sharing a screen, so if you're sharing a video, there's a little button you've got to tick before you do it. So if you go to the share button, and you've got at the bottom, you've got 2 options: share computer sound and optimize for full screen video clip. So if you want to show the students a video with sound, then you need to tick obviously where it says share computer sound. And then yes, they can hear
that. There's a question here from Maria Penna. Would you say that speaking exclusively is the best use of live sessions? Yes, I would, and I think that's what Anne and I were both saying about the you know, using the flipped classroom. I think Lindsay said it last week as well about the flipped classroom. Think about you know, this is the chance for your students to be able to speak. So whatever they can be doing in preparation for that speaking, get them doing that on the asynchronous platform, or even just, you know, at home on their own, reading and thinking about the answers to the questions. And then when they come and do the live session, then they're practicing their speaking, and it's all about this collaboration and talking to each other. To be honest, I think that face-to-face classroom should work in that way as well. You know, the pedagogy above the technology, it's nothing to do with the technology. If you can flip your classroom, whether it's face-to-face or live, then do it, because it's more effective use of the time that you spend together. Focus on collaborative activities in the classroom and have the students do individual activities like reading or watching a video at home.
Yeah. If I mean, I know Helen, you were getting some questions about describing flipped learning. I think there's a lot online about that. I would suggest googling flipped classroom or flipped learning. There's a huge number of articles and videos even that describe it in kind of in detail, rather than us trying to cover it here.
Maybe I could mention that the Clanfield and Hadfield book, the first chapter, is available for free online at the Cambridge University publishers website. So if you have access to CUP publishers website, you can get the first chapter for free.
Okay, great. Thanks.
In terms of also checking back on what's been said before, Lynn Liu, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is asking what kind of activities do you often have in a synchronous classroom? I think the webinar that Carol Rainbow did last week, and there's other webinars that she's done on, or materials that she's written about that. Take a look at what she's written of what you can do in Zoom. She's written a lot. Carol Rainbow, she's also a TCE, a consultancy tutor.
Yeah, and if you missed her talk last week, you can find that on Teaching English as well.
So somebody did ask about the asynchronous video and audio discussions, and this would mean that we were getting into the realm of discussing tools, but I will just give a quick shout out to Flipgrid, because there you can do or video discussions asynchronously, and that's very effective. Or a little tool like Vocaroo, maybe a little bit more difficult to handle, but to have it as a discussion. But those are tools that you can use asynchronously.
Okay. So a few questions around assessment, assessing learners. I'm not sure if that's something that we can.
Assessing attendance.
Well, assessing attendance, assessing, I mean, well, kind of anything really. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, I think in synchronous sessions, assessment is, unless it's a speaking activity, it's quite difficult, I think, you know.
It would be. Yeah.
I would say again, if you're a teacher working at a school, check what the policy is, check what the managers have decided in terms of assessment going on.
Yeah, I know my son today had a maths test, which he sometimes struggles with maths, and yet today with the test, I think he found it very easy. Obviously he's at home in contact with several other people, so yeah, I mean, you know, it's going to happen. I think it's difficult. Obviously there are, yeah, it's a challenge. I'm not quite sure whether there is a foolproof solution to, you know, to stop students from, I mean, you know, if it's a piece of writing, then obviously it's more difficult. You know, there isn't a single answer there, and we're teaching English, not maths. Yeah. So it's slightly different. There isn't always.
I'm sure people are working on that. You know, you've got like, you know, IELTS and TOEFL and things like that. They've been online for a long time. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's, you know, people are working on what to do in terms of how to assess students online. But yeah, I would say, you know, Google it, ask your managers, ask your colleagues.
Somebody's asking about having an asynchronous platform like Edmodo to make lessons and online courses more effective. You do need a place that everybody knows where that place is, where they can go to get the tasks. Mm-hmm. So if your school doesn't have already a VLE or an LMS, you can use something like Edmodo. It's free, so you can use that very effectively. You can even use something like Google Sites. Yeah, I'm using Google Sites right now for an emergency course, and it functions very well.
I think Russell Stannard has got some videos on using Edmodo
Yeah.
as well. So check out the what's the name of his site? Teacher training videos.
Yes.
Teacher training videos.
Yeah.
Using, or just Google using Edmodo. There's a question which I'd like to answer from Mariana Farmy. What if they don't want to participate in the class, if they're shy or very weak? Yeah, this was one of the things that I mentioned. You will probably have reticent students anyway. You have them in your face-to-face classes as well. And when they're online, it might be even more so. You know, they're sitting at home on their own and they don't want to speak. You know, you could nominate them to speak. Try and create this this friendly environment. You're the same person as you were before. You know, the other students are, nothing's changed. It's just the medium which has changed. But online, what you can use is if you use the breakout rooms, for example, that really encourages students to speak. So if you put them, you know, send them into rooms in pairs, then there's only the two students, you know, that shy student and somebody else. There's only the two of them and nobody else is listening to them. And then they come back into the main room and then report back on what they've discussed. So even if the shy student doesn't want to report to the main room what they've discussed, at least they've talked about something with their partner in the breakout room. Yeah, so that is an option for the shy or weaker students.
There's a question here which I love. How can we make online teaching less sedentary? This is perhaps one reason why I was horrified by the reports that some schools were insisting on a full school day in front of a live teacher. The more asynchronous activities you can put in, the better, because then that means that the learner is choosing their own rhythm. Yeah, so I think, yes, not so much emphasis on the live sessions is my message.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're reaching a point where we can really make a whole new assessment of how education is going to be in the future.
Yeah,
I can see huge opportunities of using online without having to get students physically in one place at the same time, and wasting a lot of time in that. But really making perfect use, the most effective use of the face, of the face-to-face sessions.
A couple of questions actually, and also in the YouTube stream about what's the ideal time or maximum time for a synchronous class. Yes, yeah. I mean, it obviously depends if you're working in a high school or in a primary school where the lessons are an hour. Perhaps that isn't so much. If you're working in a language academy where you've got maybe a 3-hour class with a 15-minute break, that's going to be a lot of time to be sat at a computer. So, I mean, Anne, you obviously, you know, you're talking about structuring the lessons and cutting. You know, a lot of it that can be done at home can be done at home, and perhaps the actual synchronous lesson can be cut down as well, or broken up into shorter kind of chunks or something. Or even if you're being made to kind of do what some people are talking about, where you're doing a full day, then, you know, obviously, you know, give students a gap, a space to kind of stand up and stretch and kind of run around the table, or do something to kind of, you know, switch off their brains from the screen for a couple of minutes, perhaps, you know.
It can be a planned activity. Follow my instructions, stand up, lift one leg, and so on and so on. It could be an activity.
Yeah. Name of the textbook again, New Canada. This is the Lindsay Clanford one. Do you want to hold it up again, Anne? I think for the last time, and then we can safely assume that people have got that. It's interaction online.
Full of ideas. It's full of ideas.
You're not on commission, are you, Anne, for that one?
Oh, I'm not actually.
Okay. I think train learners to use these programs from a distance.
There was a quick question there about the breakout rooms. If you're sending students off to breakout rooms, Ina asked, would you, as a teacher, go into the breakout rooms? I think if if you've set the task and it's clear enough, you probably wouldn't need to go into the breakout room. You'd just be sending your students in, say, for 5 minutes, and the task is clear, and then you pull them, or you set Zoom to pull them all back in after the 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I probably don't think you'd need to go in. And then you get a 5-minute break as well.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting question here. I don't know enough about the Cambridge exams, but it says I teach Cambridge exams to adults, could do plenty offline, but students won't pay for that. I think, okay, I don't know enough about the Cambridge exams, but if you're engaging with the learners in forums and so on, then maybe they would pay for that, because you can have extremely lively asynchronous activities. The example I gave, I guess, was not so lively, reading a text and answering some comprehension questions, but there were some forum questions before that. And you can have really extremely lively activities that are asynchronous, and they don't always have to be written. If you're worried about the audio oral part of exams, you can get, for example, in Moodle, you can record audio, and one of our tasks in the course I teach is recording an audio instead of writing. So there are lots of possibilities to be very creative asynchronously. And this is really interesting because the live sessions are set up at such a premium, and they are important, but I'm not sure they're the be all and end all.
Yeah. It's kind of a blended sort of, I mean, it's not in the sense of face-to-face and online, but blended in the sense of synchronous and asynchronous. I think that's, an important consideration and something to, certainly to explore a bit more. It's not, it's not all about the live session.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to say this again. This is the last time I'm saying this. A few more questions about certificates and recordings. I'll just say again. Okay. On the teaching, okay, well, first of all, when this session ends, don't close down your computer, don't kind of, when you can walk away, but when the session ends, you will be directed automatically to a survey which will give you a chance to answer some questions about your needs, and also to give us a bit of an idea of where you are and the age groups and so on that you're working with. At the end of that survey, your reward is a link to the certificate that will be there. But if you go to the Teaching English website, which I will put a link in again to in a minute, and you navigate to the webinars pages, you will see the recording from this webinar. There will also be a PDF of the slides that Anne and Helen used. There will also be the certificate there, so you can download everything there. And I will just find the link for this particular one. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the chat. There you go. That's in the chat. If you go there, not now because we're not superhuman, the recording isn't available there yet, but it will be later today or certainly tomorrow morning, or at some point over the weekend it will be there, as well as the PDF versions of the presentations and the certificate. It's a downloadable, editable PDF certificate. You just need to write your name in and download it and print it off if you need to print it off. Don't use Firefox to do that because Firefox doesn't like it for some reason. Google Chrome does. Internet Explorer bizarrely does as well. And there we go. Okay, I think we've pretty much run out of time. So it's really just for me to say thanks ever so much to Anne and to Helen for giving up part of your afternoons to come and give us a very insightful talk, each of you, on online teaching, and I hope you all found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you next Friday. It's a slightly later time, it's 7 p.m. UK time, and that's going to be Tech Tools and the Tutor's Role, and that's with Robert Martinez and Kerry Jones. And then the following week, this is one more for teacher educators, it's supporting and mentoring teachers remotely, and that's on the 9th of April. Again, all the information is on Teaching English, so please do go over to the Teaching English website and you'll find everything there. If you're not sure what the URL is, you can just Google British Council Teaching English and you'll get there eventually. Okay, Anne, Helen, thanks ever so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons, evenings.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and see you again soon, hopefully.
Thank you, and good luck to everybody. You can do
Yes.
this.
Thank you. And I'll better get ready for my next live session, which is tonight.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Okay, cheers, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.